We tend to think of history as a great library, a vast and ordered repository of human knowledge, where the past is neatly catalogued on shelves, bound in volumes with clear titles and definitive endings. We believe that with enough patience, we can walk its aisles and read the complete, unbroken story of the world. But this is an illusion of order. The real library of history is a far stranger and more mysterious place. Many of its wings are dark, its shelves are empty, and most of its books are lost. Some were burned in ancient fires, others have crumbled to dust, and many are written in languages of the dead that we can no longer comprehend. But it is the books that are on the shelves that are perhaps the most mysterious of all. These are the volumes that seem complete, but on a random page, the text simply stops, leaving a blank space filled with an unsettling silence. Or a footnote in the margin will tell a story so bizarre, so out of place, that it seems to have bled through from another reality entirely. These are the historical rabbit holes. They are not mere curiosities, they are gateways. They are the strange threads that, when pulled, unravel our entire understanding of a particular time and place. They begin with a single, baffling question, and they end in a profound and enduring enigma. In this long journey, we will leave the well-lit main halls of the library and venture into these shadowed alcoves. We will travel across the map and through the millennia, from the Bronze Age palaces of Crete to the frozen slopes of the Ural Mountains in the heart of the Cold War, from the sun-scorched deserts of ancient Egypt to the quiet, foggy shores of Edwardian Australia. Our exploration will be one of immense variety and strangeness. We will investigate impossible technologies that defy our timeline and bizarre epidemics of the mind that defy our understanding of psychology. We will stand at the edge of a bottomless pit that has consumed fortunes for 2 centuries, and on the lonely, windswept rocks where lighthouse keepers have vanished into the mist, we will meet men who appeared as if from nowhere, their pasts a complete blank, and men who were stolen from their lives, and whose quest for justice remains an unfinished chapter. For each of these 20 mysteries, we will sift through the strange evidence, explore the competing theories, and confront the unsettling fact that some stories may never have a final page. We will embrace the uncertainty and find the value not in simple answers, but in the questions themselves. So, find a comfortable position. Let the noise and the certainties of the present day fall away. We are about to begin our descent into the deep, quiet, and inexplicable rabbit holes of our shared past. Number 1. The Great Emu War. Imagine you are a former soldier, a veteran of the Great War, who has been rewarded for your service with a plot of land on the very edge of the known world, the marginal farming country of Western Australia. The year is 1932, and the world is in the grip of the Great Depression. The price of wheat has collapsed, and you and thousands of other soldier settlers are on the brink of financial ruin. And then, a new enemy arrives. They are not a foreign army, but a force of nature, a vast, migrating army of 20,000 large, flightless birds who have descended upon your farmlands, trampling crops and tearing down fences. In a state of desperation, you and your fellow farmers appeal to the government for help. The government agrees, and in a decision that seems almost comical, they dispatch the military. This was the bizarre reality that led to the Great Emu War. The army sent to deal with the birds consisted of 2 soldiers from the Royal Australian Artillery, armed with 2 Lewis automatic machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition, all under the command of a Major G.P.W. Meredith. The first engagement was a disaster. The soldiers found a flock of about 50 emus, but the birds were surprisingly difficult targets. They scattered into small groups and ran at incredible speeds, their loose feathers making them surprisingly resilient to machine gun fire. At the end of the first day, after firing hundreds of rounds, the official report noted only perhaps a dozen birds killed. The campaign descended into a frustrating farce. The emus proved to be masters of guerrilla tactics. They would split into small, leaderless groups, making it impossible to target them effectively. In one infamous engagement, the soldiers mounted a machine gun on a truck to chase a flock, but the bumpy ride made it impossible to aim, and the birds easily outran the vehicle. After weeks of fruitless and costly effort, with a kill rate of less than 1 bird for every 10 bullets fired, the military withdrew in humiliation. The press had a field day, with one British ornithologist commenting, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world." The emus had, for all intents and purposes, won. It is a strange and uniquely Australian tale of human fallibility, a military campaign lost not to men, but to the stubborn, unpredictable resilience of nature itself. Number 2. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic. This story begins with the most ordinary and joyful of human sounds, the laughter of schoolgirls. On January 30th, 1962, 3 students at a mission-run boarding school in the village of Kashasha, Tanganyika, modern-day Tanzania, started laughing at a shared joke. But then, something strange happened. They couldn't stop. The laughter, unmoored from its original source of humor, became a strange, involuntary, and deeply distressing affliction. It began to spread, first to their classmates, then to the entire school. This was the beginning of one of the most baffling cases of mass psychogenic illness, or mass hysteria, ever recorded. The laughter would come in waves, afflicting individuals for hours, sometimes even days at a time. It was often accompanied by crying, screaming, and bouts of aimless running. It was not a joyful experience. It was painful and incapacitating. Within a few weeks, 95 of the school's 159 pupils were affected. The authorities, unable to control the phenomenon, were forced to close the school down. But this only made things worse. When the students were sent home to their respective villages, they carried the strange affliction with them, like a contagious disease. The laughter epidemic spread to their families and their neighbors. Another school in a nearby village became infected and was also forced to close. The phenomenon moved through the region, affecting more than 1,000 people across multiple communities. It was a true social contagion, but one with no identifiable virus or pathogen. The epidemic finally sputtered out after an agonizing 18 months. Modern analysis suggests it was a case of mass hysteria triggered by the immense stress and anxiety felt by the students in the newly independent country, living under the strict rules of the mission school. But no definitive cause has ever been established. It remains a bizarre and unsettling testament to the powerful, mysterious connection between the mind, the body, and the community. Number 3. The tick-borne claimant. This rabbit hole begins in 1866, with a series of advertisements placed in newspapers around the world by a wealthy, grieving English noblewoman, Lady Tichborne. She was desperately searching for her eldest son, Sir Roger Tichborne, who had been presumed lost at sea more than a dozen years earlier when his ship went down off the coast of South America. This advertisement, a mother's last, desperate hope, leads you to a butcher from the dusty, working-class town of Wagga Wagga, Australia. He was a coarse, overweight man of little education who went by the name of Arthur Orton. But he claimed to be the missing Sir Roger, returned at last to claim his inheritance. Thus began the saga of the tick-borne claimant, one of the most sensational and drawn-out legal cases of the 19th century. The butcher from Australia travelled to England and, against all odds, managed to convince Lady Tichborne that he was her long-lost son. She accepted him unconditionally, despite the fact that he looked nothing like her slender, refined son and spoke no French, Roger Tichborne's first language. The rest of the Tichborne family, however, were convinced he was an imposter, and a massive legal battle ensued. The case captured the imagination of the entire country. The claimant became a folk hero to the working classes, who saw his fight as a struggle of the common man against the arrogance of the aristocracy. He was funded by a massive issuance of Tichborne bonds, sold to the public to finance his legal fees. He displayed an uncanny, perhaps, a very well-coached knowledge of obscure details from Roger Tichborne's childhood, yet he failed to recognize his own family members in court. The legal battle lasted for years, culminating in one of the longest trials in English history. Was he the real Roger Tichborne? His appearance and memory altered by years of hardship, or was he a cunning and audacious impostor? A butcher from Australia who came closer than anyone in history to stealing a noble title and one of England's great fortunes. It is a profound mystery about the nature of identity, the power of belief, and the malleability of memory. Number 4. The Terreur of France. This is a descent into one of the most bizarre and disturbing cases in the annals of medical history. The story begins in late 18th century France with a young man from the countryside known only as Terreur. From birth, he was afflicted with a condition that has never been explained: a limitless, insatiable, and grotesque appetite. By his late teens, despite being of normal height and weight, he was capable of eating a quarter of a bullock, weighing as much as himself, in a single day. He was constantly, ravenously hungry. His parents, unable to provide for his endless hunger, threw him out of the house. This rabbit hole explores his strange and tragic life. He became a street performer in Paris, swallowing corks, stones, live animals, and whole baskets of apples to the astonishment of the crowds. His body was strangely deformed by his condition. He had an unnaturally wide mouth and esophagus, and his skin would hang so loosely that he could wrap the folds of skin from his abdomen around his waist. When he did not eat, his skin would sag. When he ate, his stomach would distend like a great balloon. He joined the French Revolutionary Army, but the military rations were not nearly enough to satisfy him. He was caught eating the poultices from other patients' wounds and drinking their drained blood in the army hospital. His strange ability caught the attention of French military intelligence, who decided to test him as a spy. They had him swallow a wooden box containing a document, which he passed 2 days later, the document intact. For his first mission, he was sent into Prussia with a message swallowed in the same manner, but he was almost immediately captured. He was flogged and subjected to a mock execution before being sent back to the French lines in disgrace. His case became a medical curiosity, but no doctor could cure him or explain his condition. The story takes its final, dark turn when a 14-month-old toddler mysteriously disappeared from the hospital where Terreur was being treated. The powerful suspicion that he had succumbed to his most horrific impulse fell upon him. He was driven from the hospital and died a few years later from tuberculosis. His body, a medical anomaly, to the very end. Number 5. The Voynich manuscript. This rabbit hole starts not with a person or an event, but with a single physical object, a medieval book. It is a handwritten and illustrated codex, carbon dated to the early 15th century. Its mystery is simple, elegant, and absolute. No one on earth can read it. This leads you into the world of historical cryptography and the century-long and completely failed effort to decipher the manuscript's unique and graceful script. Housed today at Yale University, its 240 pages are filled with a language that appears nowhere else. The script is composed of characters that are not a simple cipher for a known language. It has its own apparent grammar, syntax, and statistical properties that mimic a real, functional language. The book is also filled with hundreds of intricate, hand-drawn illustrations, which only deepen the enigma. It is divided into several sections. One is clearly botanical, filled with drawings of plants and flowers, but the vast majority of these plants are completely unidentifiable, matching no known species on Earth. Another section is astronomical, with complex charts of the sun, moon, and stars, but they depict zodiacal constellations that are alien to us. Perhaps the strangest section is the balneological section, which features surreal diagrams of dozens of small, naked female figures bathing in pools of strange green liquid, all connected by an elaborate and organic-looking network of pipes and tubes that seem to flow through strange, organ-like structures. What is this book? Is it a lost medical text from a forgotten culture? An alchemist's secret journal, with its text deliberately encrypted to protect its dangerous knowledge? Is it an elaborate, meaningless hoax, created centuries ago to fool a wealthy collector? Or is it something else entirely? A work of glossolalia, where a mystic has channeled a divine or unknown language onto the page. The Voynich manuscript is a perfect enigma, a message from a lost world that has reached us in form but not in content. Number 6. The Clockwork of the Gods. Imagine you are a sponge diver in the year 1900, working off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. Your team discovers an ancient Roman shipwreck filled with beautiful bronze and marble statues. But amongst the priceless art, you recover a strange, corroded lump of bronze about the size of a large book. It is dismissed as a curiosity, perhaps a piece of the ship itself, and it sits in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens for 50 years, slowly falling apart. Then, a historian notices that inside the corroded layers are a series of incredibly complex, interlocking gears. This discovery began the century-long process of unlocking one of the most profound and baffling mysteries in the history of technology. Using advanced X-ray and CT scanning, scientists have revealed the object to be a machine of almost unbelievable sophistication. It is a complex clockwork mechanism of at least 30 bronze gears, all working in concert. It was not a simple clock. Inscriptions on the device reveal its true purpose. By turning a single knob on its side, the user could perfectly track the position of the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets that were known to the ancient Greeks. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses with startling accuracy, and it was even programmed to account for the subtle variations in the moon's orbit. It was, in effect, a complex, portable, mechanical computer. The central, staggering mystery is this: the shipwreck dates to the honest century BC. The level of mechanical and astronomical knowledge required to build this device should not have existed in the ancient world. The kind of differential gearing seen inside the machine would not be invented again for another 1,500 years, until the great astronomical clocks of 14th century Europe. Who built it? Was it a singular genius like Archimedes, whose own mechanical marvels were the stuff of legend? Was it the product of a long-lost school of scientific thought? And if they could build this, what else did they create that has been lost to time? The device forces us to completely re-evaluate the technological capabilities of the ancient world. It is the mystery of the Antikythera mechanism. Number 7. The Lost Franklin Expedition. Imagine it is May of 1845. 2 of the most advanced ships in the British Royal Navy, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, are preparing to leave London. They are behemoths of exploration, their wooden hulls reinforced with iron plating to withstand the crushing ice of the Arctic. They are equipped with steam engines, a central heating system, and enough tinned food and supplies to last for 3 years. On board are 129 of the finest officers and sailors in the Royal Navy, all under the command of the veteran and celebrated explorer, Sir John Franklin. Their mission is to finally conquer the last great prize of Arctic exploration, the discovery of the fabled Northwest Passage. In July, they were seen by a whaling ship in Baffin Bay, waiting for the ice to clear so they could enter the labyrinth of the Canadian Arctic archipelago. And then, they vanished from the face of the earth. For years, there was only silence. The British Admiralty launched one of the largest and most expensive search and rescue operations in history, but found nothing. This rabbit hole descends into a grim tale of hubris, desperation, and slow-motion disaster. The first clues came years later, from the local Inuit people, who told strange stories of seeing desperate, starving white men, and pointed to graves and scattered remains. They spoke of the ships being trapped for years in the ice, and of the ultimate taboo, cannibalism. These stories were dismissed at the time by a horrified Victorian society, who refused to believe that their heroic naval officers could resort to such savagery. But over the next century and a half, the grim truth emerged. Skeletons found on King William Island showed clear signs of cut marks, confirming the Inuit accounts of cannibalism. Modern analysis of the remains revealed another culprit: acute lead poisoning. The 3 years' worth of tinned food that was supposed to sustain the expedition was sealed with cheap, sloppy lead solder, which had leached into the food, slowly poisoning the men, leading to insanity and death. The 2 ships themselves remained lost for over 160 years, until they were finally miraculously discovered on the seabed in 2014 and 2016. But the central mysteries remain. What exactly was the sequence of events that led to the abandonment of the ships, and where is the final resting place of Sir John Franklin himself? Number 8. The Dancing Plague of 1518. Imagine, it is a hot July day, in the city of Strasbourg, in the year 1518. A woman, known only as Frau Trophia, steps out of her house and into a narrow, cobblestone street, and she begins to dance. There is no music. Her face is grim, her movements convulsive and unrelenting. She does not stop for rest or water. She dances for nearly a week, a silent, desperate marathon that leaves her exhausted and her feet bloody. But the true horror begins when other people start to join her. This was the beginning of one of the most bizarre and terrifying mass psychogenic events in history. Within a week, over 30 other people had been gripped by the same uncontrollable urge to dance. The city authorities were baffled. Believing the affliction was caused by hot blood, their prescribed cure was not rest, but more dancing. They cleared out a guild hall, built a stage, and even hired professional musicians to accompany the dancers, hoping they would dance the fever out of their systems. This had a catastrophic effect. The public spectacle encouraged even more people to join the ranks of the afflicted. At its peak, over 400 citizens of Strasbourg were consumed by the dancing plague. They danced for days on end, without rest. Many collapsed and died from heart attacks, strokes, and sheer exhaustion. The epidemic raged for months before finally subsiding. What could cause such a phenomenon? Early theories blamed supernatural or astrological causes. Modern explanations point towards mass hysteria, triggered by the extreme famine, poverty, and disease that were rampant in the region at the time. Another compelling theory is that the dancers had ingested ergot, a toxic mold that grows on damp rye grain. Ergotism can cause violent muscle spasms, hallucinations, and delirium, but neither theory perfectly explains the specific, coordinated nature of the dancing, or why it lasted for so long. It remains a chilling medical mystery. Number 9. The Somerton Man. On the morning of December 1948, the body of a man was found slumped against a seawall on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. He was impeccably dressed in a suit and tie, his shoes polished, with no signs of violence or struggle. In his pockets were a train ticket, a bus ticket, some chewing gum, and a comb, but there were no signs of identification. All the labels on his clothing had been carefully removed. An autopsy could find no cause of death. He had not been poisoned, and he was in peak physical condition. The man, it seemed, did not exist. This was the start of Australia's most enduring and profound cold case. The rabbit hole deepens when investigators find a small, secret fob pocket sewn into the man's trousers. Inside is a tiny, tightly rolled scrap of paper, torn from a book, which contains 2 printed words. Tamam shud. The phrase was identified as Persian, meaning "it is ended" or "finished." It is the final phrase from the famous collection of poems, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Police launched a nationwide search for the specific copy of the book from which the scrap was torn. A man came forward, claiming he had found a rare copy of the Rubaiyat tossed into the back of his car around the time of the man's death. In the back of this book, faintly written in pencil, was what appeared to be a secret code 5 lines of seemingly random letters that has never been deciphered. Also in the book was a phone number belonging to a local nurse. When questioned, the nurse claimed she had once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, but had given it to an army lieutenant named Alfred Boxall. For a moment, it seemed the case was solved. But then, Alfred Boxall was found, alive and well, with his own copy of the Rubaiyat, complete with the Tamam Shud page intact. Who was the dead man on the beach? Was he a jilted lover who committed suicide using an untraceable poison? Or, as many suspect, given the Cold War tensions of the era, was he a spy? Was the strange code a final, garbled message? The mystery of the Somerton Man is a perfect enigma, a puzzle of secret codes, lost love, and Cold War espionage that has remained unsolved for over 70 years. Number 10. The Lost Justice for Solomon Northup. Imagine you are a free man. It is 1841. You are a skilled carpenter and a talented violinist, a respected citizen and a family man living in Saratoga Springs, New York. You are approached by two friendly, well-dressed gentlemen who claim to be from a traveling circus. They offer you a lucrative, short-term job as a musician for their circus in Washington, D.C. You agree and travel with them to the nation's capital. There, they celebrate your new employment with a night of drinking. You wake up the next morning not in your hotel room, but in darkness, chained to the floor of a slave pen. Your money and your free papers are gone. You have been kidnapped. This was the terrifying reality for Solomon Northup, whose harrowing story of being drugged, kidnapped, and sold into slavery in the Deep South is famously told in his memoir, 12 Years a Slave. His story is one of incredible resilience and survival, but there is a deep and frustrating rabbit hole at the very end of his tale. After 12 years of brutal enslavement, Northup was finally able to get a message to his family, and through the efforts of a sympathetic white lawyer, he was rescued and restored to his freedom in 1853. Upon his return, he sought justice. He and his lawyer filed charges against the two men who had first approached him, the men who had orchestrated his kidnapping. He identified them as Merrill Northup and Alexander Merrill. He also filed charges against the notorious Washington, D.C. slave trader, James H. Birch, who had sold him south. But the legal system, weighted heavily against black men, made justice impossible. As a black man, Northup was legally barred from testifying against white men in a Washington, D.C. court. The case against the slave trader collapsed. The case against his two kidnappers in New York was also eventually dropped after years of delays and legal wrangling. And here is the mystery. After the failure of these legal cases, these menthy architects of his 12-year nightmare simply vanish from the historical record. What happened to them? Did they change their names and flee? Did they live out their lives in comfortable anonymity, unpunished for their crime? The complete disappearance of the men responsible for one of the most well-documented cases of kidnapping in American history is a testament to the profound injustices of the era. It is the final, frustrating, and unsolved chapter in the life of Solomon Northup. Number 11. The Lost Army of Cambyses. Imagine you are a soldier in the most powerful army on earth. It is 524 BC, and you are part of the mighty Persian Empire, under the command of the fearsome King Cambyses II, who has just conquered the ancient kingdom of Egypt. Your king, in an act of supreme confidence, decides to dispatch a massive expeditionary force from the city of Thebes. Your mission is to march west, across hundreds of miles of the unforgiving Libyan desert, to attack the remote but hugely wealthy Oracle of Amun at the Siwa Oasis, a sacred place that had refused to submit to Persian rule. Your army is 50,000 strong, according to the Greek historian Herodotus, who recounts the tale. The army began its long march. It reached an oasis, a final stop before the great push across the sea of sand, and then it marched out into the desert, heading towards Siwa, and vanished. The entire army, 50,000 men, their weapons, their supplies, their animals, all disappeared from history without a trace. Herodotus reports that the locals believed the army had been swallowed by a simoom, a sudden, colossal sandstorm that rose up from the desert and buried them all alive under mountains of sand. For centuries, this story was considered a legend, a cautionary tale told by the Greeks about the hubris of a Persian king who dared to defy the gods. No definitive archaeological evidence of this lost army has ever been found, but this rabbit hole is kept alive by tantalizing and controversial clues. In recent decades, geologists have found evidence of massive, ancient sandstorms in that region, powerful enough to have done exactly what Herodotus described. Explorers and archaeologists have periodically claimed to have found fragments of Persian armor, bones, or water pots in the vast desert, but none have ever been definitively verified. Was Herodotus telling the truth? Is the perfectly preserved remnant of a 50-man army still lying silently beneath the sands, waiting to be discovered? It is one of the greatest military disappearance mysteries of the ancient world. Number 12. The Man in the Iron Mask. Imagine, it is the late 17th century, the golden age of King Louis XIV of France. In the shadowy world of the French prison system, there is a prisoner unlike any other. He is a man of apparent importance, treated with deference by his jailers. He has moved from prison to prison over the course of decades, including a long stay in the infamous Bastille. But there is one chilling, inviolable rule that governs his existence. No one is ever allowed to see his face. His features are perpetually concealed behind a mask, described by contemporaries not as iron, but as black velvet, held together with steel clasps. His identity is the most closely guarded state secret in all of France. This is the story of the Man in the Iron Mask. His existence is not a legend. It is a historical fact, documented in the records of the prisons where he was held, and in the letters of his jailer. But his identity, and the reason for his extraordinary lifelong imprisonment and concealment, remains a profound mystery. The secrecy was so absolute that even the great writer and philosopher Voltaire, who was later imprisoned in the Bastille himself, became obsessed with the case, and it was he who popularized the more dramatic Iron Mask version of the story. The theories about who he could have been are a sprawling rabbit hole of political intrigue. The most famous and romantic theory, promoted by Voltaire and later by Alexandre Dumas, is that the prisoner was the identical twin brother of King Louis XIV himself, hidden away from birth to prevent a civil war over the succession. Other theories suggest he was a disgraced general, a foreign diplomat who knew too much, or even Molière, the famous playwright, secretly imprisoned for offending the king. Another compelling theory suggests he was the illegitimate son of royalty. The prisoner died in 1703 and was buried under a false name, his cell stripped of all its contents and his mask destroyed, ensuring his secret would follow him to the grave. Number 13. The Oak Island Money Pit. This rabbit hole begins not with an army or a king, but with a teenage boy and a strange depression in the ground. The year is 1795. A young man named Daniel McGuinness is exploring Oak Island, a small, wooded island off the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada. He discovers a circular depression in the earth under an old oak tree, whose branches show signs of having been used with a block and tackle. Believing he may have stumbled upon the buried treasure of Captain Kidd, or another famous pirate, he and his friends begin to dig. What they uncovered would become one of the world's longest, most expensive, and most frustrating treasure hunts in history. A few feet down, they hit a layer of flagstones. 10 feet below that, a platform of solid oak logs. 10 feet below that, another platform. They continued this pattern until they could dig no further on their own. Over the next 200 years, a succession of treasure hunting syndicates would take up the challenge, bringing in ever more sophisticated machinery. But the pit seemed to be protected by an ingenious and malevolent piece of engineering. Every time the excavators reached a significant depth, a mysterious, man-made flood tunnel, connected to the nearby ocean, would be triggered, completely inundating the pit with seawater and forcing the search to be abandoned. What could possibly be buried so deep and be so cleverly protected? The theories are a sprawling maze of historical speculation. Is it pirate treasure? The lost jewels of Marie Antoinette? The treasury of the Knights Templar, smuggled out of France after their persecution? Or, as some have proposed, is the pit the hiding place for the original manuscripts of William Shakespeare, proving that Francis Bacon was their true author? Despite 2 centuries of digging, numerous collapses, and the tragic deaths of 6 men, no central treasure has ever been recovered. All that has been found are tantalizing clues: coconut fibers from hundreds of feet down, a strange stone tablet inscribed with a cipher, and a single Spanish coin from the 17th century. It is a story of obsession, of a mystery that may have been designed never to be solved. It is the Oak Island Money Pit. Number 14. The disappearance of the SS Waratah. Imagine, it is July of 1909. A magnificent new passenger steamship is making its way up the coast of South Africa. She is the SS Waratah, a state-of-the-art, 500-foot-long vessel, built to be the flagship of the Blue Anchor Line for their regular service between Europe and Australia. She is luxurious, she is powerful, and on only her second-ever voyage, she has 211 passengers and crew aboard. On July 26th, she leaves the port of Durban, heading for Cape Town. The next day, she is spotted by another ship, the Clan McIntyre, battling through the increasingly heavy seas and gale-force winds that are common to that treacherous stretch of coastline. The Waratah overtakes the slower ship and disappears over the horizon. And then, she vanishes from the world. She never arrived in Cape Town. No distress call was ever received. In the days and weeks that followed, one of the most extensive sea searches of the era was launched. But they found nothing. Not a single body. Not a single lifebelt. Not a single piece of wreckage was ever definitively identified as coming from the ship. It was as if the great vessel, with all 211 souls aboard, had simply been plucked from the surface of the ocean. What happened to her? The official inquiry concluded that she was likely capsized by a freak wave, a massive rogue wave of the type that is now known to occur in that region, which could have rolled the ship over in an instant, sending her to the bottom before any lifeboats could be launched or distress calls sent. Another theory focuses on the ship's design. One expert passenger on its maiden voyage had complained that the ship felt top-heavy and unstable, and he had a nightmare of the ship rolling over. Did she have a fatal design flaw? A problem with her center of gravity that made her vulnerable in a heavy sea? Other theories are more dramatic, suggesting a sudden, catastrophic explosion in her coal bunkers. For over a century, numerous search expeditions have tried to find the wreck on the seabed, but the wild coast of South Africa is known for its deep waters and powerful currents. The ship, dubbed Australia's Titanic, remains lost. Her final moments a complete and terrifying mystery. Number 15. The Enigma of Caspar Hauser. Imagine it is Whit Monday, 1828, in the city of Nuremberg, Germany. A teenage boy is found wandering aimlessly in the streets. He is dressed in strange, ill-fitting clothes and can barely walk. He speaks only a few garbled phrases. He carries with him a sealed letter addressed to a local cavalry captain. The letter, supposedly written by a poor laborer, claims that the boy was left with him as an infant in 1812, and that he has kept the boy in total isolation, in a small, dark cell for his entire life, never letting him see another human being. The boy, who says his name is Caspar Hauser, claims the same, that he has spent his life in a dark room with only a toy horse, fed only bread and water by a man he never saw. Thus began one of Europe's most profound human mysteries. Caspar became a public sensation, a wild child who was adopted by the city and became the subject of intense study and speculation. His education was rapid but strange. He had the mind of an infant in the body of a young man. He had incredible senses, but was terrified of everyday objects. He was a blank slate, a person without a past. But who was he? Was his story true? Was he a genuine victim of a horrific, decades-long imprisonment? Or was he a cunning and elaborate fraud, an imposter of unknown origin? The rabbit hole deepens as theories about his identity emerged. The most prominent theory suggested he was, in fact, the hereditary prince of the nearby Grand Duchy of Baden, who had supposedly died in infancy. According to this theory, he had been switched at birth with a dying baby and hidden away to allow a rival branch of the family to inherit the throne. This would make him a prince, deprived of his kingdom. The story takes its final, tragic turn 5 years later. Caspar Hauser, who had survived at least one earlier assassination attempt, was found stabbed in a local park. He died 3 days later. His killer was never found. Was he murdered to silence him, to prevent him from ever claiming his royal birthright? Or was his death the final, desperate act of a fraud who knew his story was beginning to unravel? The enigma of who Caspar Hauser truly was and who killed him remains unsolved. Number 16. The Poison Pen of Circleville. Imagine you live in a small, quiet, all-American town, a place where everyone knows everyone else, and where secrets are thought to be safely buried. Then, one day, an anonymous letter arrives in your mailbox. It is written in a crude, distinctive, blocky script, and it proves that someone knows your darkest secret. The letter writer accuses you of having an affair and demands you put a stop to it. Soon, letters start arriving all over town, sent to dozens of residents, exposing alleged embezzlements, revealing long-hidden infidelities, and threatening violence against those who do not comply. A reign of terror begins, conducted not with a weapon, but with a pen and a postage stamp. This was the reality for the residents of Circleville, Ohio, beginning in 1976. The main target of the letters was a school bus driver named Mary Gillespie, accused of having an affair with the school superintendent. Her husband, Ron, also began receiving letters, threatening his life if he did not expose the affair. In 1977, Ron Gillespie died in a bizarre and suspicious single-car crash. His car had gone off the road and hit a tree, and a pistol was found to have been fired once next to his body. The sheriff ruled it an accident, but the family believed the letter writer had somehow engineered his death. The letters continued, even taunting Mary about her husband's death. The investigation eventually focused on Mary's own brother-in-law, Paul Fresher. Based on his ex-wife's testimony and a flimsy analysis of the pistol from the crash site, Fresher was convicted of attempted murder for a separate booby trap incident and was implicated as the letter writer. He was sent to prison, and the town breathed a sigh of relief. But then, the most baffling part of the mystery occurred. Even with Freshour behind bars, the letters started again, postmarked from Columbus, near the prison. They continued for years. Freshour himself even received a letter in prison, taunting him. He maintained his innocence until the day he died. Who was the real author of the letters? Did they drive a man to his death? And was an innocent man sent to prison while the real culprit continued their campaign of psychological terror for years? This is the enduring, unsolved mystery of the Circleville letter writer. Number 17. The Silent Lighthouse of Eilean Mor. Imagine you are the captain of a steamship passing through the remote, windswept Outer Hebrides of Scotland. The year is 1900. You are passing the small, uninhabited island of Eilean Mor, the site of a newly constructed lighthouse, a beacon of modernity in an ancient landscape. As you pass, you notice something strange. Despite the worsening weather, the lighthouse is dark. No light is shining from the lamp. You note it in your log and sail on. 2 weeks later, a lighthouse tender, the Hesperus, makes its scheduled relief voyage to the island. As it approaches, the crew sees that the flagpole is bare. None of the 3 lighthouse keepers are there to greet them on the landing platform, and an eerie silence hangs over the place. A small party is sent ashore. What they found has become one of the most haunting and atmospheric mysteries in maritime history. Inside the lighthouse, 2 of the 3 oilskin coats belonging to the keepers were missing. The kitchen table was set with a half-eaten meal of meat and potatoes. A single chair was overturned. The clock on the wall had stopped. Everything seemed to be in order, yet profoundly wrong. The final entries in the lighthouse logbook were even stranger. The principal keeper, a rugged and experienced seaman, had written of a terrible storm, with winds the like of which he had never seen. He wrote that one of the other keepers had been crying, and another had gone very quiet. This was strange, because a storm of that magnitude was not reported by any other ships in the area at that time. The final, chilling entry, written in a different hand, simply read, "Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all." Storm, but the 3 keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur were gone. An extensive search of the barren, rocky island revealed no sign of them. Had they all been swept away by a single massive rogue wave while tending to equipment near the shore? An event that would explain the lack of bodies, but not the strange logbook entries. Or did the intense isolation and the oppressive, howling wind finally cause one of them to snap, murdering the other two before throwing himself into the sea? The strange log entries have led to more supernatural theories of a madness induced by the island itself, or an abduction by something otherworldly. The mystery of what happened to the three keepers of the Eilean Moor lighthouse has never been solved. Number 18. The Sodder Children's Christmas Fire. Imagine it is Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family, a father, a mother, and their 10 children are celebrating in their large 2-story timber home. Late that night, the mother, Jenny, is awakened by the phone ringing. It is a wrong number. As she goes back to sleep, she notices that the lights are on and the doors are unlocked, which is unusual. A short time later, she is awakened again, this time by a strange thud on the roof and the smell of smoke. The house is on fire. She, her husband George, and 4 of their children manage to escape the rapidly spreading blaze. But 5 of their children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, ranging in age from 5 to 14, are trapped on the upper floor. The horror that follows is a cascade of inexplicable failures. George rushes to get his heavy ladder to rescue the children from their 2nd-story window. But the ladder, which was always kept in the same place, is missing. He tries to drive one of his work trucks to the side of the house to climb on top of it, but neither of his trucks, which had been working perfectly the day before, will start. The local fire department is slow to arrive, and by the time they do, the house has been reduced to a pile of ash. The 5 children are presumed to have perished in the blaze. But this is where the mystery begins. When the fire chief sifted through the ashes the next day, he found no bones, no flesh, not a single physical trace of the 5 children. He told the grieving parents that the fire had been hot enough to completely cremate the bodies, an explanation that a local crematorium employee said was impossible. The Sodder parents began to believe their children had not died in the fire at all, but had been kidnapped, and the fire set to cover the tracks. They suspected the Sicilian mafia, from whom George, an Italian immigrant, had received threats after refusing to bow to extortion. The rabbit hole deepens with strange sightings of the children in the years that followed, and the discovery of the missing ladder in a nearby embankment. The most tantalizing clue came 20 years later, in 1967, when the family received a photograph in the mail of a young man who looked remarkably like their son Louis would have looked, with a cryptic message on the back. The Sodder family maintained a billboard on the side of the highway, offering a reward for information about their missing children, until the last of the surviving family members passed away. Number 19. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. Imagine you are a member of a search party in the desolate, snow-covered Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. It is February 1959. You are searching for a group of 9 experienced, highly competent hikers and skiers who went missing on a winter expedition. When you finally find their campsite on the slopes of a mountain known as Kolatsialk or Dead Mountain, you find a scene that defies all logic and explanation. Their tent is half buried in snow, but it has been sliced open from the inside. All of the group's belongings, their shoes, their warm clothes, their food, their accessoires still inside the tent. Following a trail of footprints leading away from the camp, you begin to find the bodies. The first 2 are discovered nearly a mile away, by the remains of a small fire, under a large pine tree. They are dressed only in their underwear. 3 more bodies, including that of the group's leader, Igor Dyatlov, are found between the tree and the tent, in poses that suggest they were attempting to return to the camp. But the discovery of the final 4 bodies, 2 months later, is what transforms this tragedy into a profound and terrifying mystery. They are found in a ravine, buried under 13 feet of snow, and they have suffered horrific, massive internal injuries. One has major chest fractures, consistent with the force of a car crash. Another has a crushed skull, and one of the women is missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips. Inexplicably, there are no external signs of trauma on their bodies, no bruises or soft tissue damage that would indicate they had been struck or attacked. Furthermore, some of their clothing was found to contain significant levels of radiation. What could have caused a group of experienced hikers to cut their way out of their own tent and flee, half-dressed, into the sub-zero temperatures of a Siberian night? What could have inflicted such devastating, crushing internal injuries without leaving any external mark? The official Soviet investigation concluded that the hikers died from a compelling natural force. Theories have ranged from a simple avalanche to a paradoxical undressing phenomenon caused by hypothermia to secret military weapons tests, or even something more paranormal, like an encounter with a Yeti or a UFO. The case was abruptly closed and the files were classified, ensuring that what truly happened to the 9 hikers remains one of the most chilling and deeply mysterious events of the 20th century. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. Number 20. The Baigong Pipes. Imagine you are a scientist exploring a remote, arid, and largely uninhabited part of the Tibetan Plateau in Qinghai Province. At the foot of a mountain named Beigongshan, you find a small, pyramid-shaped hill. At its base, you discover a series of caves. Inside one of these caves, embedded in the ancient rock of the cave floor and wall, you find something that should not be there. It is a network of perfectly round, reddish-brown pipes, some as thick as a man's leg. They appear to be made of metal. One pipe, over a foot in diameter, slopes down from the top of the cave into the earth. Even more strangely, on the shore of a nearby salt lake, you find more of these pipes, some emerging from the surface of the water, others buried beneath the lakebed, all arranged in what appears to be a deliberate, complex pattern. This is the perplexing discovery that has become one of China's most controversial archaeological puzzles. Analysis of the pipes shows they are composed primarily of iron oxide, with a high percentage of silicon dioxide and calcium oxide. What makes this so strange is their apparent age. The rock in which they are embedded is ancient, and dating of the material using thermoluminescence suggests the pipes themselves were formed or installed an astonishing 150,000 years ago, a time when, according to conventional history, human beings had not yet developed metallurgy, let alone the ability to manufacture and install a complex plumbing or industrial system. What are these objects? The most sensational theory is that they are an out-of-place artifact, or opart, perhaps the ruins of a launch tower, a drainage system, or an observatory left behind by extraterrestrial visitors in the distant past. Scientists, however, have proposed more grounded, though equally fascinating explanations. One theory is that they are a rare but natural geological formation, the product of iron-rich magma forcing its way up through fissures in the sandstone, or a process of sedimentation and chemical replacement that formed iron-rich casts inside ancient fissures. Another compelling theory suggests they are the fossilized remains of ancient trees or giant root systems, where the organic material has been replaced over millennia by iron deposits. But none of these geological explanations perfectly account for the uniform size, deliberate placement, and seemingly manufactured appearance of the pipes. They remain a complete anomaly, an industrial-looking relic found in an impossibly ancient geological context. It is the mystery of the Baigong Pipes. And so, we climb the final rungs of the ladder and emerge back into the familiar light of the present day. The dust of forgotten ages settles. The strange whispers from locked rooms begin to fade, and the journey comes to an end. We have traveled together down 20 separate rabbit holes, each one a fissure in the solid ground of accepted history. And we return with our understanding of the past, not clarified, but enriched and made wonderfully, profoundly, more complex. What have we learned from this descent into the great library of shadows? We have stood on the precipice of human ambition and watched it crumble. We have been with the Franklin expedition in the crushing ice of the Arctic, and with the lost army of Cambyses in the burning sands of the Egyptian desert. bearing witness to moments when the indomitable human will to explore and conquer was met with the raw, silent, and absolute indifference of nature. These stories are not just tales of failure. They are humbling reminders that for all our courage and technology, we are but small figures in a vast and powerful landscape that does not always yield to our desires. We have peered into the unsettling mystery of the human mind itself. We have stood in the streets of Strasbourg and watched a city dance itself to death. And we have listened to the echoes of an inexplicable laughter that swept across a nation. We have felt the obsessive pull of a treasure hunt on Oak Island that has consumed generations. And we have read the poison pen letters of a small town that tore itself apart with suspicion. These rabbit holes lead not to a lost city or a hidden tomb, but into the very labyrinth of human psychology, revealing the immense power of belief, hysteria, and obsession to shape our reality in ways that science still struggles to explain. We have confronted artifacts that should not exist, objects that challenge our linear perception of history. We have held in our mind's eye the impossible clockwork of the Antikythera mechanism, a computer built 2,000 years before its time. We have turned the pages of the Voynich manuscript, a book written in a language that may be from another world, or from the deepest recesses of the human imagination. And we have stood before the Beigong pipes, an industrial-looking anomaly embedded in impossibly ancient rock. These are not just mysteries, they are paradoxes. They suggest that the past is not a simple upward curve of progress, but a landscape of lost knowledge and forgotten genius. Perhaps most profoundly, we have looked into the faces of ghosts. We have met enigmatic figures like Caspar Hauser and the Somerton Man, individuals who appeared as if from nowhere. Their identities a complete blank, forcing us to ask what a person is without a past. We have contemplated the fate of the princes in the tower and the Sodder children, mysteries born not of cosmic strangeness, but of human cruelty and a failure of justice that leaves a wound that can never truly heal. These stories remind us that the most haunting mysteries are often the most personal ones. Ultimately, these rabbit holes teach us a unique and valuable form of humility. They show us that the past is not a thing to be definitively solved or known, but a vast and mysterious territory to be explored with a sense of wonder. The value of these stories lies not in finding a neat and tidy solution, but in the journey down into the darkness, in the act of asking the questions, and in the quiet, contemplative awe we feel when confronted with the vastness of what we do not know. They are the frayed edges of the great tapestry of the past, and they are what make the entire picture so endlessly fascinating. But while some mysteries remain stubbornly locked away, others have yielded their secrets to modern ingenuity. There are ancient codes that have been cracked, lost cities that have been found, and anonymous remains that have been identified through the power of DNA. To explore the other side of history, not the questions that remain, but the great historical puzzles that were once thought unsolvable but have now, finally, been solved. Click the video that's on the screen right now.